The film is set in the future, 2034, where an unstoppable flu has decimated South Korea. It's said that this virus was 100 times deadlier than COVID-19 and resulted into hundreds of thousands deaths or more. When the city is in chaos from this flu, people die on streets and cars crash into each other. The government then piles up dead bodies like trash at a large stadium before burning them all together because there's no place left for burial. It has become an epidemic of epic proportions. This is the worst part of the flu, but to understand how it started, we need to go back a few weeks. It all started in Hong Kong, when a shipping container full of illegal immigrants was being prepared for transport to Bandang, South Korea. As the person in charge was inspecting the people inside, someone suddenly started coughing vigorously. Despite this, he lets the container pass through. A woman in Bandang named Kim In-hae is involved in a car accident, and her car has fallen into a construction hole. The rescue squad arrives quickly, but the car is stuck in a spot where only one person can fit at a time. Making his way down to Kim, Ji-koo slowly takes the initiative. The situation is so unstable that if they make too much movement, they risk the car plunging down even deeper. Ji-koo's experience eventually enables him to rescue Kim. Ji-koo approaches Kim after the rescue operation is successful, but Kim turns to the side and then leaves in the ambulance. At night, Kim calls Ji-koo asking him to meet her at the place where the accident happened. Ji-koo is really excited, believing that Kim has called to thank him for his help with her grocery shopping, but it actually turns out she's calling to get her bag from the hole. He initially refuses, saying it's against company protocol, but after Kim leaves and he makes an attempt to get her bag by going into the hole, his coworker helps him get it out. He looked into the bag and found a medical card, which showed that Kim was a doctor. Suddenly, a phone inside the bag starts ringing. Ji-koo takes tea out and answers it. It's Kim's daughter, Miru, on the other side, and after a small chat, Ji-koo agrees to meet her after school. Somewhere else, two brothers, Byung-ki and Byung-woo, approach the container carrying illegal immigrants. When they open the container, they find everyone except one person dead. There is also a very strong smell inside the container. They are confused about what to do, so they take videos of the scene and put the lone survivor inside their truck. After driving for a while, Byung-ki goes into a grocery store to get some supplies. The survivor makes a run for it after sensing the opportunity. When Byung-ki comes back from the store, he notices that the man has escaped, and his brother is coughing very badly. He tries to catch the survivor, but eventually gives up and takes his brother to a clinic. The doctor gives Byung-woo some medicines and tells him to rest, but Byung-woo continues coughing. He sprays his droplets on all the people in his vicinity. Elsewhere, Ji-koo visits Miru outside of school and tries to talk to her, but Miru just takes her mother's bag and Ji-koo's business card before leaving. As he heads home, Ji-koo noticed that some people were coughing a lot on the bus near him. In the next scene we are shown how the virus is slowly taking over the city of Bandang. Kim is overjoyed to find her lost bag has been returned when she gets home. She joyfully hugs her daughter and also thanks Ji-koo for his help. The mom and daughter are bonding when Kim gets a call from the hospital saying there is an emergency. She had no other choice but to leave her granddaughter Miru with her grandmother. When Kim arrives at the hospital, she notices that everyone looks terrified. She walks quickly into the emergency room, where Byung-woo, the patient, is very ill. He has coughed up a lot of blood, and has red rashes on his body. Kim comes to the conclusion that it is avian flu and shares this information with her superiors, who are not convinced. The doctors find footage on Byung-woo's phone of a container filled with dead bodies. They are positive that the virus started from that location, and talk to the patient's brother, Byung-ki, to get more information, but he does not say anything. As Byung-ki hears the emergency alarm, he becomes anxious. He ignores the doctor's warning and rushes into the emergency room, only to find that his brother has died. He is so upset that he hugs his brother and gets blood on his hands. After a long and difficult battle, the doctors finally manage to subdue Byung-ki. He had been touching them with his hands, but they were finally able to stop him. The next scene shows Miru getting bored and leaving her house to explore on her own. A vehicle almost hits her, but Monsai, the survivor from the container, saves her. Miru realizes that he is hungry and gives him something to eat. Monsai tries to warn the little girl to stay away from him because he is sick, but Miru continues talking to him. Monsai starts coughing a while later, prompting Miru to get some aid. She asks Jiku for help, but he arrives too late and Monsai is already gone. Many people in the city have contracted the virus by this time, causing hospitals to become overwhelmed with patients. Meanwhile, Kim and a team from the KCDC, Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, locate the container and incinerate all the dead bodies inside. A large number of rats that had been feeding on the corpses escape into the city. A group of the nation's best doctors are gathered together for an emergency meeting. After a long and intense discussion, the team came to the conclusion that the deadly virus is a mutated version of the H5N1 strain, which can kill its victims within 36 hours. The higher officials are also instructed to quarantine the city, or else the disease may spread to the whole country, and even the world. In another location, Jiku has brought Miru to a supermarket. They have lunch and start to get to know each other better while sharing some of their secrets. A commotion starts as they get ready to leave. Individuals begin to expectorate blood and lose consciousness. Some of them die immediately. When Jiku notices a woman who is about to fall from the escalator, he saves her but, in the process, he loses sight of Miru. At the emergency meeting, some of the doctors and politicians argue that the quarantine is unnecessary. A series of accidents happen outside, which cause many people to die. The virus is now spreading so quickly that hospitals and communication systems are becoming overwhelmed, so the quarantine is being initiated forcefully. The politicians and doctors are so scared that they decide to fly to Seoul to continue their research. Smith makes a case for staying. As the researchers are planning to evacuate the city, Dr. Smith makes a case for staying. Kim tells her co-workers she'll be there soon after she finds her daughter. She calls Miru, but Jiku answers and tells her about the situation in the supermarket. She arrives at the destination quickly, but is dismayed to discover that her daughter is nowhere to be found. The situation quickly spirals out of control as people start looting stores and fighting each other. The army is deployed as a result of a huge brawl. Kim and Jiku look for the little girl in the middle of the confusion and, after a while, they finally find her. The three people leave the supermarket before it closes. Kim asks Jiku to leave the city with them once they are safe, but he declines, saying that he needs to stay and help the people. After that, he gave Kim his car keys and told them to leave. He joins forces with a co-worker and frees the people who are stuck in the store. Kim and her daughter reach the airport and go through security. Although they are almost to the last helicopter to Seoul, Miru begins coughing and they are not allowed to continue. The Korean army, along with the US forces and the KCDC, enforced a strict lockdown throughout the city that night. The residents are moved to a quarantine camp. After convening in Seoul, politicians, national and international physicians agree that testing citizens is the best way to identify who is infected and who is not. One of the physicians says that if they mix the two groups of people, the virus will spread more, but the others tell him to be quiet. The plan is to release people who don't have any symptoms and treat people who are infected in a separate ward. Kim arrives at the camp with her daughter and is surprised by how run down it is. The space is so limited that people can barely move, let alone live there. Some of them are already having coughing up blood as a symptom, while others live in constant fear that they will be infected soon. Kim later notices red rashes on her daughter's neck while she is tying her hair. She leads Miru through the examination room and into the quarantine camp even though she is scared. The following morning, as per the government's request, some soldiers took to rooftops and shot at the birds out of fear that they would spread the virus to other areas. Monsai is eventually found by the authorities down in the camp. After examining him, the doctors are amazed to find out that he has somehow overcome the virus and developed immunity. Kim is the only doctor in the camp who knows about the virus, so they call her to start working on an antibody. Kim manages to get the antibody from him a few hours later. However, when she presents the idea of injecting the antibodies directly into a patient, her seniors are not receptive to the idea. Kim tries to sneak her sick daughter out of the quarantine area later that day, but is caught by staff who are trying to find her using her tag number. They say that her results were positive, so they came to get her. Kim is extremely upset that she is going to be separated from her daughter, but Jiku quickly steps in and introduces himself as number 2066. The guards take him away to the infected zone with this. One of his friends later finds him and uses his card to take him out. Kim goes to the special tent where Monsai is being held. Even though she was told by her superiors not to inject the antibodies directly, she went ahead and used it on Miru, who is now very sick. Kim begins a transfusion between her daughter and Monsai, but is discovered by troops who quickly break into the room. They give her a sedative and take the infected Miru away. He follows the men and finds Miru's headband along the way. After a short time, he arrives at a place where there are thousands of dead bodies of people who were infected, being wrapped in plastic. Some of them are still alive. What Jiku finds is so terrible that it makes him scream. A large crane is picking up a pile of dead bodies and dumping them into a stadium, which has now become an incineration pit. He heads to the pit out of fear that something bad has happened to the girl. He searches for her as soon as he arrives. Jiku hears a ringtone and realizes it belongs to Miru. He races to the scene and finds the little girl, alive and well, wrapped in plastic. The situation inside the quarantine camp is becoming increasingly tense. The crowd went wild and erupted out of the camp when an officer fatally shot an infected soldier. As they are leaving, they see Jiku save Miru from a burning pile of corpses. They realize that the infected are being burned alive. The medical personnel left because of the public outburst and continued their research on Monsai elsewhere. They request Kim's company, but she denies them, stating that she needs to locate her daughter. As Byung-ki and the others are leaving, he sees Monsai and remembers his brother. He then stabs Monsai as revenge. Kim looks for her daughter around the camp but cannot find her. She left with the medical staff, even though she didn't want to. The president sees the city of Bundang in a state of complete chaos when he goes back to Seoul. He is constantly being pressured by a member of the UN, Schneider, to eliminate the infected, so that they don't cross the border. He calls off the army until a cure is found. Schneider and the vice president are displeased with the decision, but they opt to wait for the antibody. When Monsai dies in the ambulance, their chances of developing an antibody also die. As soon as the vice president finds out, he tells the army to stop the civilians who are angry from getting to the Seoul border. During the shootout, Jiku manages to escape the place with Miru, who starts to feel better by this time. Unfortunately, several civilians are killed during the process. This suggests that the antibody was successful in treating her. Kim is prevented from meeting her daughter by armed soldiers. She keeps talking about how her daughter has the cure, so one of the soldiers takes her to their base to talk to the president. A man overhears Jiku saying Miru has the antibody and goes after them. He isolates her in a room when she's alone and tries to get her blood. Jiku arrives with his friend, and they engage in a brutal fight with the other three. After much struggle, Jiku finally defeats the man, but his best friend is left gravely wounded from the fight. Kim speaks with the president and tells him that her daughter has been cured of the virus and may have the antibody. On hearing this, the president orders his soldiers to refrain from firing, but Schneider isn't convinced and tells them to continue shooting. Kim sees Miru among the infected and starts running towards her. She is shot and killed by Schneider as she attempts to bring her daughter over the containment line. Before the soldiers can do any more damage, Miru protects her mom and tells the men not to shoot over and over again. This touches the hearts of everyone, including the soldiers, and they stand back. Even people who are infected with the virus get new motivation and start running towards the border. When Schneider sees the soldiers not shooting, he calls for an airstrike. The president is enraged by this and orders his men to shoot down any fighter planes that enter Bundang. This leads to a big argument between the two, but eventually Schneider gives up. The president announces that he will find a cure and do whatever it takes to save his people after the danger is averted. Miru is sent to Seoul in the last scene to create a vaccine, while Kim and Jiku stay behind. The movie ends on a high note as the reporter announces that the vaccine has been successful and that the people of Bundang will be the first to receive it. What do you think?